We know what the factors of production are: land, labor, and capital. Land are the natural resources, anything that comes from nature. Labor, obviously, is a human resource, the people that you have working for you. And then capital are the buildings, tools, and machines used to produce goods. Once again, marginal means additional. So producers think about the cost of making one more unit of good when deciding how to maximize their profits. How much is it going to cost me to make one more unit, and how much revenue am I going to make by producing that next unit? So labor and output. Marginal product of labor. When we change, is the change in output from hiring one more worker. It measures the change in output at the margin where the last worker has been hired or fired. Once again, marginal means additional. We're going to look at how does our output change when we hire one more worker. And once again, how does our revenue change? And so you can have what's called increasing marginal returns, diminishing marginal returns, and you can also have what's called negative marginal returns. So make sure that you get that in your notes. So as we look at this chart, this is the number of workers. So when we have 0 workers, our total product, or the amount they make, obviously is 0. When we have 1 worker, that first worker made 3. When we add an additional worker, that second worker, we want to know what the difference is, what the marginal product is. And so when we go from 1 to 2 workers, that's a difference of 1. We go from 3 to 8. That's a difference of 5. So the marginal product, or the additional output that second person made, was 5 units. When we go from 2 to 3 workers, we go from 8 to 14. So that third worker added an additional 6 units of product. When we go from 3 to 4, our total product goes from 14 to 19, and so that fourth person added 5. When we go from 4 to 5 workers, we go from 19 to 23 total product, and look what's happening. This number is going down. Total product is going up, which means we're actually increasing, but by adding additional workers, they're not adding as much as the worker before them. Until eventually, if we added a 9th and a 10th and 11th worker, our productivity might actually start, in terms of what that additional worker is adding, might start to go negative. So this is the amount of workers, this is your input, this is the output, this is the total output. And marginal means when we add one more worker, what does that worker add? And so the formula for calculating marginal product is the change in output, we find the change here, 5, divided by the change in input. So this is a change of 1. So 5 over 1 is 5. The change here is 6. The change here is 1. So 6 over 1 is 6. Average product, all we're doing is saying, on average, how many are each of our workers making. So if we have one worker making 3, then on average he's making 3. If we have 2 workers making 8, on average each one of them is making 4. If we have 3 making 14, on average they're each making 4.67. So you can see what happens is when we have 8 workers, on average each one of them is making 3.64. But what's happening here is our productivity with each worker is decreasing, and this is because what happens is we're not changing any of the other factors of production. We're not adding any more machines. And so what you have are, you're adding more people to fixed resources. Eventually they're going to kind of stand around. They're going to start talking to each other. There's not going to be enough for them to do. So we're going to actually see our productivity diminish just because the only thing that we are changing here is the number of workers that we have. So we have a situation here when marginal product is increasing. It's called increasing marginal returns. We are getting an increasing return for every person that we hired. Then when we get into this yellow part, what we have is called diminishing marginal returns. As we add an additional worker, that next worker, we're still adding to the total product, but what they add is not as much as the worker before them. So if all the other factors are remaining constant, if we're not changing any of the other factors of production and all we are doing is adding labor, Hopefully you saw that from the activity. Everyone wants more staplers and everyone wants more scissors because we're running out of things for people to do. So productivity is actually going to start to diminish, and eventually we will add so many workers where our productivity will actually decrease.